A very busy actor these days, starring in such blockbuster films as Streets of Fire, Canada's Rick Moranis had grown a beard, which completely changed his looks. I commented on it and asked him about
I
it.
grew the beard for a role in a picture, which I wound up not doing, and then my agent called and said, hold the beard, because we might need it for another one. So I'm steps away from the tonsorial parlor, awaiting my agent's. Now my agent is controlling my shaving, not only my career, you know. So.
Tell me, chartered accountants and bargain hunters are really going to hate you for this film, The Ghostbusters.
I hope my accountant doesn't hate me. I realized that last night.
Did you watch it last night? Did you go
Yeah, I
through
saw
it?
the picture twice this week, for the first time on Wednesday night, and I was like, I hadn't seen a thing and prior to that, and I was just caught up in the hysteria. And then last night I stood at the back and watched it again and listened to the audience and really studied it. And now what I'm going to do is sneak into a paying audience a couple of weeks into the run in Barrie or, you know, someplace like that, Hamilton, and just watch kids have a ball with it, because it's a great movie.
Well, the critics managed a lot of laughs, so that must have made you feel good.
Yeah, well, I think, you know, sure. I think that's great that the critics laughed, sure.
Rick, when did you decide that comedy was your specialty, and where did you grow up, and where were you born? Of course, you're a Canadian, a fellow Canadian.
Hey, one question at a time.
All right.
Come on, Claire. I grew up, I'm born and raised in Toronto, in the suburbs. I live there now. I don't know, my parents tell me I was a funny kid. I remember in school that I was, you know, when I was bored, I would kind of misbehave a little bit. Some of it was comedy, some of it was trying to be comedy, and most of it was quite pathetic. And the same with my career. Some of it's been comedy, some of it has tried to be comedy, and some of it has been quite pathetic.
Well, certainly the Mackenzie Brothers was an enormous success.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun.
Who created that idea? Who thought of that?
I did.
You did?
No, it was a running thing with Dave and I that we would always take credit for everything. Dave and I created it as a result of Canadian content legislation, which I'm sure you're aware of.
Mm-hmm.
The old half-hour syndicated show ran 26 minutes in the States, because there were 4 minutes of commercials, and ran 28 minutes in Canada, because the CBC had 2 minutes less commercials, being the public network. So they asked us, with the extra 2 minutes, to do something Canadian. And I had been doing satire on Canadian content prior to that, and this just infuriated me, because here were 7 performers who were virtually all Canadians, writing, producing, performing, editing, doing everything on the show in Canada. What could be more Canadian? Drinking beer and frying bacon and sitting in front of a map in a park and a toque, and they said that'll be fine. So that day, there was Dave and I and a number of other people around. Nobody else jumped in, otherwise there might have been a third Mackenzie brother or a Mackenzie sister. Dave and I figured that out of 26 half hours, maybe we would do a couple of those segments and somebody else would do something else, and we wound up doing 26 2-minute bits. And we wound up doing 80 2-minute bits, and they picked the 26 out that were the best, because there were a couple that, you know, went nowhere, or I started laughing, or Dave walked off the set, and, you know, I mean, who knows what happened. They were always improvised. And then through that year, we started to get a lot of mail, and the thing started to catch on, and they became sort of the cultural landmark that they did. But it surprised us a great deal, and it was a lot of fun.
Americans responded to this Canadian Mackenzie Brothers too. What about your film? How did that go in the States? It was an enormous hit in Canada.
Yeah, it was a big hit in Canada. What happened was Frankie Blondes, president of MGM, saw the picture with a screening room full of kids. Strange Brew. And the kids loved it, and he thought he had a huge hit. So he released it in 850 theaters, which meant that it was on screens in cities where the album hadn't gotten any airplay and the TV show hadn't played. And in those cities, it didn't do good business, and it brought down the per-screen average. Mm-hmm. And the studio thought that it wasn't working, so they pulled it and sent something else in. So I believe the release pattern was wrong for the movie. It should have opened in cities where we were known and slowly built. I thought it could have been much more successful that way.
Well, you've certainly proved that there's Canadian humor in the Canadian experience. Are you going to continue with the Mackenzie Brothers? Are you going to...
Dave and I are working on another album, and we're also talking to an American distributor of Canadian beer representing the beer company to do some commercials.